Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how you can build such beautiful user authentication view with cool animation. Then I will show you how you can authenticate using Firebase Authentication with email and password provider and also Google sign-in provider. And finally, I will add forgot password feature so user will be able to change their password. I will use Riverpod to manage the state, so you will also learn state management with Riverpod. One thing I wanna mention that I will build this app on Android, iOS and macOS, but mostly I will work on iOS simulator. If you don't have Xcode, then prefer using an Android emulator and choose a taller Android emulator like Pixel 4 XL or something. Since I won't spend time making the UI responsive and adaptive, otherwise it will take very long time. If you don't care about building the UI, then download the code and skip this part. And if anything is not clear to you, you can ask me in the comment. I will try my best to answer them. And you can also join my Discord if you want, but anyway, we have a lot to do, so let's get started. Please consider supporting me on Patreon or donate me on Buy Me Coffee. Open the terminal and create a new Flutter project, call it Firebase Authentication Riverpod. And name is up to you, you can call anything you want. Open in VS Code and delete all comments and delete this useless title property. And also delete this folder since we are not going to build on these platforms. Create 4 folders. Number 1 is authentication, which will contain everything related to user authentication. Number 2 is component, which will contain all reusable UI components like button, text input field, etc. Number 3, which will be user profile. We will show when the user successfully signs in. Finally, number 4, repository, which will contain only the authentication repository. Inside the authentication folder, create a dot file, call it authentication view. Inside that, create a stateful widget authentication view. Import material, return scaffold from the build method. Set resize to avoid button set to false. This will prevent the scaffold body to resize when the keyboard appears. Add a column to its body, and inside the column's children we are going to return our own custom text field. Inside the components folder, create a new file called textinputfield.dot. Create a stateless widget, call it textinputfield. Return text field from the build method. Open authentication view and import textinputfield.dot. Create a new text input field here inside the columns children. Run the app. And I forgot to add authentication view to home property. Open main.dot file, import authentication view and delete my homepage class. And pass a new authentication view to the home property. Also set canvas color to this color. Now restart the app and we can see our text field at the very top. We don't want our text input field to be that high. So open authentication view, wrap the column with padding, set addIndex.from LTRB, set left to 16, top to 50, right 16 and bottom 0. Now reload the app and we can see the paddings are added. Inside the authentication view class, declare a private state variable of type boolean. Call it showSignin. Give it initial value true. This will be used to toggle between sign up and sign in form. But right now we are going to use this variable to build our text input field animation. Add a gesture detector after our text input field. Inside the onTap callback function, add setState and toggle showSignin value. pass text to its child property and set the string to toggle. Wrap the text in padding and set addInsect.all16. Now pass this so sign in variable to text input field. This will complain because it doesn't take any argument. So open text input field and add a final bool variable so sign in. Now the error goes away. Inside the text field, set input decoration to decoration property. Inside that, set border to input border.none. This will remove the default underline border. Set hint text to email and set this text style to hint style. Wrap this text field with container, set horizontal padding 16. Set box decoration to decoration property. Set color to color.white. Set border radius .circular12. Set border.all to border. Set color to this color and width is 1.5. Reload the app and you can see the change. If you add a string to error text and reload, and you can see it looks ugly. So wrap the container with column and set main axis size to minimum. Inside this column's children's list, after the container, add a text widget, set error. Wrap it with padding addInsect.from LTRB set 16 spore 160. And also set the column's cross axis alignment to start. Set the color of this text from theme of context.error color. Next, we are going to toggle this error text. When the toggle button is tapped, add the ternary operator and check if show sign in is true. Then show the text, else show a sizebox.shrink. Now tap on the toggle button and the text is appearing and disappearing instantly. We need to add animation here. The easiest way to do this by wrapping with animated switcher, which will animate between its new child and previous child. So create a new file inside components folder, call it sizePageSwitcher.dot. Inside this file, create a stateless widget called sizePageSwitcher, which will take one required name parameter, child of type widget. Return animated switcher from the build method, set duration to 400 milliseconds, set switch in and switch out curve to ease in. Now open text input field and import sizePageSwitcher. Down here, cut this piece of code and add a new sizePageSwitcher and paste the copied code to its child property. Reload the app and you can see it's animating, but it's paging in and out because the default animation is cross-page. So what we want is also animate the size as well opacity. Animated switcher has a property called transition builder, which takes a callback function. This helps us to make our own custom and complex animation, which has two arguments. One is child of type widget, which will be passed to the child of animation switcher. So another is animation of type double to animate, which is obvious. Return the child and wrap this with size transition and pass the animation. Since we want to combine with paid animation, therefore wrap with paid transition and pass animation to opacity. And reload the app and see it's now both fading and resizing. But we can make it even better. And if you look closely, the text is also being clipped. At this moment, both size and opacity changing at the same time, which is not a huge issue, but I personally do not like it. So to make it look better, we need to use staggered animation to animate the size first, then opacity. If you don't know anything about staggered animation, then it's basically you decide when to animate what within the total time period using the animation controller value, which is always between 0.0 to 1. So in our case, we can say size animation from 0.0 to 0.5 and then fade animation from 0.5 to 1. So the first 200 milliseconds will have size transition, then next 200 milliseconds will have fade transition since the total time is 400 milliseconds. Create a new twin object. Twins are basically linear interpolation between two values. Give beginning value 0.0 and end 1. Generally, we would pass animation object here, but for staggered animation, we have to pass curved animation. Then pass the animation to parent and pass interval object to curve. Here we specify the interval from 0.0 to 0.5. Finally, store it in a final variable called size animation. Then pass it to size transition. We also have to do the same for fade transition. So copy and paste this code. Change the variable name. The twin remains same since opacity is from 0.0 to 1. And within 0.5 to 1 interval, pass it to fade transition and reload and see this is exactly what we wanted to do. Now no more clipping. This animation is done. So open text input field. At the top, add these 4 properties and delete this source sign in. Add these properties to constructor and give obscure text initial value false. Down here, remove the email string and pass hint text. Next, pass onChange function to onChange. Here, check if error text is not equal to null, then show this padding widget and pass error text here. We need to force unwrap null since we are already checking non-null. Finally, pass obscure text to obscure text. Open authentication view and pass email string as well an empty callback function. Also add another text input field for password. Next, time to create our button. So inside the components folder, create a file called animatedButton.dot. Inside this, create a stateful widget called animatedButton. Declare 2 final variables. One is on tap of type nullable callback and another is child of type widget. Then mix in the state class with single ticker provider state mixin. Declare animation controller and initialize inside init state. Set the duration to 200 milliseconds. And dispose the animation controller inside the dispose method. So when we tap the button, there are 2 events occur. One is we put our finger, which is tap down. Another is when we lift our finger, which is tap up. So we can create a button that will scale down when we tap down and scale back to normal when we tap up. We can achieve this very easily using gesture detector. So return gesture detector from the build method. We can use these two properties on tap down and on tap up. Call animation controller.forward from on tap down callback. Call reverse from on tap up. And here pass widget.child. But we haven't yet declared our scaled animation. So at the top declare animation and initialize inside init state. So beginning value is 1 and end is 0.9. Call animate pass animation controller. To actually make the animation happen, we need animated builder, which will rebuild the widget when the animation controller value changes. Otherwise, we won't see any animation. Create an animated builder, pass animation controller. Inside this builder callback function, return transform.scaled, pass animation.value. Pass onTap callback function to onTap. And finally, make sure there is no animation if the onTap is null. Also same for onTap up. Open authentication view and import animated button. After the password input field, create a new animated button. Pass a container to child. Set symmetric vertical padding to 12. Alignment center. Decoration text box decoration. Set this color to color and border radius circular 12 to border radius. Then pass the text widget to container's child. Set sign in. And style to this text style. Now if we reload the app and press the button, and we can see we have nice cool effect. If you see the original design, here the top shape and the bottom button is in stack with the sign in form. So wrap the padding with stack. Cut this gesture detector and paste after padding. Now it's showing at the top left corner, so we need to position this. Wrap with position, set left and right to 0 and bottom 30. Now it's at the bottom but not centered. So change padding to container and set alignment to center. We could extract this to a separate widget. So create a new file, call it auth_switch_button.dot. Create auth_switch_button stateless widget. Declare two properties, so sign in of type bool and onTap of type void callback. Open authentication view, copy this piece of code and return from this build method. Cut this anonymous function. We will pass this to onTap callback. Open authentication view. Import auth switch button. Replace this widget with auth switch button. Pass source sign in and paste the copied anonymous function to on tab. It's time that we build sign in and sign up view separately. So inside the authentication folder, create sign up and sign in folder. Also create sign in with Google and forgot password folder. Inside the sign up folder, create sign up.dot file. Create sign up stateless widget. So okay, I wanna pause this for a moment. So here, if you notice, there is no forgot password folder inside authentication folder because I accidentally deleted that. So don't delete it. Create signin.dot file inside sign in folder, then create sign in stateless widget. Since both sign in and sign up view have the common view like email, password, and a button, so we can copy this column and return from both sign in and sign up widget. Open authentication view and import sign in and sign up. Delete this column and check when source sign in is true, return sign in, else return sign up. Open signup.dot file. Before email, add an input field font name. Then add size boxes in between these columns children to add some padding. This build method has already become big. On top of this, we will add more logic. So it's better to extract them to a separate widget. So create 4 dot files, name, email, password, and button. And inside the name.dot file, create a stateless widget name. Then cut this name input field from signup.dot file and return that from this build method. Now we can simply just copy everything from here and then paste inside the email and password.dot file and change the name since we haven't added any logic. Next, open signup.dot file and copy animated button. Open button.dot file, create a stateless widget called signup button, and return the copied code from build method. Finally, open signup file and import all 4 files. Then replace these with name, email, password, and sign up button. Now our build method looks so much small and easy to understand. If you open signin.dot file, you can see this piece of code looks exactly the same as the code inside sign up button other than the text. So we can extract it to a widget and reuse it. So extract it and call rounded button style. which will take title of type string. So pass sign up from here. Now create a new file inside components folder, call it rounded button style. Cut this widget from here and paste inside rounded button style. Now our widget looks short and clean, and we will add logic here when we will implement authentication. Open signin.py. Since both sign up and sign in have same email, password and button, and we haven't added any logic, so we can literally just copy those files from sign up folder and paste them into sign in folder. Open button.py and change the name to sign in button and update the title. Open signin.py and import those 3 files. And replace them with email, password and sign in button. Add size box to give some space in between. We should make sure that the password input field has obscured text, so set obscured text to true for both sign in and sign up. Next, we have to create forgot password. So inside the sign in folder, create a file, call it forgot password button. Create forgot password button stateless widget. From the build method, return a gesture detector and leave the on tab callback empty. We will navigate to forgot password screen when this button is tapped. Add symmetric vertical padding of 8. Add alignment to center right because this button will be on the right side. Finally, add a text widget and set a string forgot password. Set this color to the text. Open signin.py, import forgot password button. After the password, add forgot password button. Reload the app. Now we can see our button. If we tap on it, then nothing will happen. So time to build forgot password screen. Now I'm going to create forgot password folder inside authentication folder, which I previously deleted by mistake. You should have that. Inside that folder, create a file forgot password . Return scaffold from build method since this will be a separate screen. You know what? Let's just rename this widget to forgot password view. I'm not going to customize the UI of this view. It will be a text input field with 2 buttons. If you want, then feel free to do that. Add center to its body. Then add a column to its child. Set main axis alignment to center. Also wrap this column with padding 16. Add a text input field to columns children. Leave onChange callback empty. After the text input field, add 2 buttons in a row. First button will be a close button, so this will pop this route. Second button will be the request button. This button will be used to request to send email. And that email will have a link to reset password. For now, leave the callback empty. Inside this on-tap callback, push forgot password view. It will be full screen dialog. And you can see now we are able to navigate to forgot password view, but our buttons are not centered. So open forgot password view, set main axis alignment to center of row. Now it's centered. If you see the original design, there is a divider after sign in button. So create a file inside sign in folder, call it or_divider. I know the name is weird, but let's just stick to the name, or you can name it anything you want. Anyway, from the build method, return padding with symmetric vertical 24. Inside the list, add a divider, then add a text widget and type OR and set color to black with opacity 0.4. Then add another divider. Import or_divider.dot in sign in and add after sign in button. We can only see the text, so we need to wrap both dividers with expanded widget. This will give the maximum equal available space inside the row. Next, time to build Google sign in button. So create a Google sign in button.dot file. Return animated button from the build method. Add a container, set symmetric vertical padding of 18. Set alignment center. Set box decoration to decoration. Set border radius circular 12. This will give rounded corner. Set border.all to border. Set color black with opacity 0.2. Set width 1.5. This will give outline border. Add a text widget to child property and set sign in with Google. And finally, this text style to style property. Leave the on-tab callback empty. Open signin.dot file, import Google sign in button. Add that at the end of columns children. Sign in UI is done. If we switch between sign in and sign up, there is no animation right now. So we already built size fade switcher for widget switching animation. We could use that, but that won't look nice. So instead of animating size, we can animate the offset. So create a new file inside components, call it slide fade switcher.dot. And copy everything from size fade switcher and paste inside slide fade switcher and change the name to slide fade switcher. Delete the curves, change the duration to 800 milliseconds. Change this variable name to offset animation. The twin generic type is now offset type. The beginning value is offset 0 and 0.1. And the end value is offset 0. Delete the curve animation since we don't need interval for this animation. We want this animation to happen from point 0 to 1. Change size transition to slide transition. Pass offset animation to position. Open authentication view, import slide fade switcher. Cut this code and return slide fade switcher. And paste the code here. If we toggle, we can see a nice transition animation. We could also animate this auth switcher button using slide fade switcher. Open auth switcher button. At the top declare this text style and down here pass it to the text widget. Import slide fade switcher and wrap this text widget. Then check if show sign in is true. Then add this string to text widget. Else copy and paste this text widget and change this string. And if we try to toggle, then there is no animation because animation switcher will not show any animation transition if new and old child is same widget with different parameters. To force the transition happen, we need to use keys to explicitly tell they are different widgets. And we can see the animation is working. When the user will tap on sign in or sign up button, then we should show loading animation. If else, then error dialog. So open sign in button inside sign in folder. Inside this callback, we are going to build error dialog. Call show Cupertino dialog. Return Cupertino dialog. Set a title and add Cupertino dialog action to action list, which will be shown at the bottom of the dialog. Since we will show this error dialog multiple times, we need to extract this to a widget. Down here, create a stateless widget, call it error dialog. But show Cupertino dialog method doesn't have widget return type, so we can't return from build method. We can only return Cupertino error dialog. So we can create a static method inside the error dialog and then return show Cupertino dialog from here. Since static method is accessible without creating object of that class, so we can call show Cupertino dialog then return error dialog from the builder. This will create error dialog object and return it. Inside this callback, we can call that show static method on error dialog. And we can see the dialog is showing. Now if we want, we can still be able to call error dialog constructor. That means show Cupertino dialog method will not be called and we will not be able to see the dialog. If we check the source code, then we can see the show Cupertino dialog is pushing a new route. If we make our constructor private name, since we don't care about the name, so we can just use an underscore. Now we will be able to force to use only the static method. We can access the private constructor from this file, so we need to move error dialog to a separate file. Create a new file inside components folder, call it loading error dot. We will put both loading sheet and error dialog inside this file. Move error dialog there. Now we can't access the private constructor, only the static method show is available. And finally, instead of hard-coded error string, we can add a property to update the error message. So I'm going to use this package to show loading animation. You can use circular progress indicator, it's up to you. Open loading alert.dot file. Create a stateless widget called loading sheet. This will be similar to error dialog, so make the constructor to private name constructor. Create a static method show which takes a build context. Return show model bottom sheet. Set is dismissible and enable drag to false, so user won't be able to close the sheet. So this will make the sheet's top left and right corner rounded. Return loading sheet from builder callback. Inside the build method, return size box of height 250. Add a center widget, then add loading animation widget. I'm going to choose stagger dots wave. You can choose anything else you want. Set this color and size 80. Inside this callback, add loading sheet dot show, and we can see the bottom sheet. We need to restart the app to stop the animation. Anyway, delete these lines since we will show programmatically. The next part is this top clipped animated shape. You can skip this part and get finished UI source code from the link in the video description. If it's too hard for you or if you aren't interested in such complex animation, it's only for visual. You can even put any other static image. Before we start coding, let's talk about how we are going to draw this shape. Now if we look at our shape design in Figma, if I double click, you can see these points to make the shape. We need to give Flutter those points location, and then Flutter will draw exactly same shape. By the way, you can download this Figma design from the link in this description. If the total width is x1 and height is y1 and that point's location is x2, y2, then we cannot just use each point's fixed location, since our device size is not fixed. So we have to calculate the width and height ratio. Then we have to multiply total width and height with corresponding width and height ratio. And to get the width or height ratio, we have to divide total width or height by that point's x or y value. Back to VS Code. Create a folder animated shape inside components folder. Inside that folder, create two files, top shape.dot and animated shape.dot. Inside top shape.dot file, create a class top shape extends from custom clipper of type path. Override getClip and shouldReclip. Instantiate path and return it. Return true from should reclip, otherwise it won't animate. The top shape class is not a widget. We have to wrap it with clip path before we use it. We can use a static method draw of return type widget and return clip path with top shape clipper. This method will take color, which is the shape color, text, which is the title, and animation controller for animation. Create animation controller property and make the constructor private to prevent calling default constructor, and pass the animation controller. Add colored box, pass the color. This colored box will be clipped. Add shape area, then add padding with only left 16. Add a text widget and pass the text. And set this text style to style property. Open animated shape.dot file. Create animated shape stateful widget. This class will be responsible for changing animation state. Add these three properties. Color and title will be passed to top shape, and to animate the shape we will use the show variable. Define animation controller and initialize inside init state with duration 800 milliseconds. Call forward method so the shape will appear while animating. Override dispose method and call dispose on animation controller. Return size box of width double.infinity, which is the device width, and height 209. Return top shape.draw from builder callback and pass required variables. Open authentication view, import animated shape.dot. After padding widget, add animated shape. Set color to this color, set show to true for now, and title is create account. Open top shape.dot file. We are now going to draw the path. So inside the Figma, we can see there are 7 points we need to draw. We don't care about the origin. I already drew dots for each point to get their location easily. We could select each dot and get its X and Y position. But I used a rectangle to get its position. I just don't know why I did it in hard way, but you don't need to. Just don't do that way. Just select this dot and get its position. But anyway, copy the height and divide by 209. I would suggest you to add 2 print statements inside getClip method. It will be much easier to copy from the debug console. Call line2 method on path. Since this point is a straight line and pass x value 0 and y value is size.height times the ratio. We can't see it since it's just a straight line. So draw a straight line from the current point to the 7th point, which is top right corner. Then close the path, which will draw a straight line from that point to origin. Next point is this point, which has a curved path. So we are going to use this cubic 2 method. If you don't understand anything by reading this documentation, Then basically this point is x3, y3, which is our second point. And this node or handle is x2, y2. And this node is x1, y1. Now you can spend time calculating the ratio of each location, but I have already done it, so I'm going to just copy and paste. I will also do this for other point. And you can see it looks exactly same as the original design. Next, time to animate this shape. We are going to animate the height of each point. So it will start as a straight line at the top, then gradually increase the height to current height. So we are going to replace all y points with a twin. The beginning value is 0 and the end value is that point's value. As usual, I'm going to copy and paste everything. And if we restart the app, we can see a nice animation when the shape appears. But if we switch between sign in and sign up, we don't see any animation. Open authentication view and add another animated shape after this animated shape. Set color to this color. Set show to inverse show sign in, which is just adding an exclamation, and title to welcome back. We have to somehow call animation controller.forward and reverse. We could create a global key or a controller, but we can instead override the did update widget method. This method is called when the parent rebuilds. Therefore, we can check if widget.show is true, then reverse else forward. It's animating very smoothly. There is one last screen to build, which is user profile. It will be very basic. Inside the profile folder, create a file profile.dot. Inside that, create profile stateless widget. Add 3 text widgets for user ID, email and email verified, and a sign out button with empty callback. And that wraps up the UI tutorial. And if you have been following along this tutorial, I would suggest you to take a break, come back later, and maybe go through the code and get familiar. Yeah, so I will see you after a while. Welcome back to this section. Before we start writing code, you must know how to create local and remote package and depend on it. If you don't know, then I already made a tutorial. You can watch that if you want. So create 2 package folders, Firebase Auth repository and POM validators. First, we are going to build form validators package. This package will be responsible for validating text input fields, create pubspec.yaml file, and add required and necessary fields. We are going to depend on this forms package. This package makes validating forms easier. Create lib folder. Inside that, create the barrel file and src folder. Inside the barrel file, export name, email, and password.dot file, as well as forms package. These three files don't exist, so create them inside src folder. Open email.dot file. Create an enum email validation error, and we will have two types of error. One is empty and another is invalid. And you can add more obviously. Create email class which extends from forms input. Its generic type of string and email validation error, which is input type and error type. Create a named constructor email.pure called super.pure and pass empty string. Create another named constructor email.dirty which takes a string called super.dirty and pass the string. So when we initialize email by calling email.pure constructor, there will be no validation. Once the user starts typing, it becomes dirty. Therefore, we will use email.dirty and then it will start validating our input string. Override the validator method. Inside this method, we are going to write validation logic. We are going to use regex to validate the string. I'm going to use this pattern. You can use different pattern if you want. If you can't type this pattern, then check description. I will give a link to copy. Convert this string to regex. Inside this validator function, check if the value matches with the regex, then return null, which means it's valid. Else, if the value is empty, then return email validation error.empty. And finally, return validation error.invalid. This validation function returns email validation error, but we have to show error string. So we can create a static method which will return string based on the error. Next, open name.dot file. It will be almost same as email except the validation logic. Inside the validator method, check if the string is empty, then return name validation error.empty. Else, if check the length is less than 3, then return name validation error.invalid. Name must have at least 3 characters. And finally, return null, which means valid. You can use regex to validate the name as well. Also create that static method showNameError message to return string based on the error. Next, open password.dot file. Similar to name and email, create password validation error and password class. Create pure and dirty named constructor. Override validator method. And we are going to check if the password is empty, then return password validation error.empty. Else, if less than 6 characters, then return password validation error.invalid. And finally, return null, which is valid. And again, you can use regex to validate password. And finally, add show password error message method, similar to name and email. Inside the forms validator folder, create analysis_options.yaml and include Flutter links. So our form validators package is done. Open pubspec.yaml file of our main project, then add Flutter, Riverpod, and Equatable. So while recording, I accidentally added Riverpod instead of Flutter Riverpod, and I will correct that later. And also depend on our local package form validators. Inside the signup folder, create a folder called controller Inside that, create signup state.dot pile. Create signup state class here and extend from equatable. This will make this class value equality, so two instances with same values of this class will be considered as equal. Create pipe state variables, name, email, password, status, and error message which is of type nullable string. Normally you would create these variables inside your state class of stateful widget. Then call setState when these values change to update the UI. Import forms validators package. Add these variables to constructor and give them initial default value. Using pure name constructor, set nothing for error message. Create copy with method. If you don't know what copy with method is, then if we call copy with method on an instance of this class, and we can update one or more properties of that instance. If we don't provide value of any property, then it will use existing value. Finally, override props getter. No need to add error message, it's not necessary here. Now we need to create another class to hold business logic as well update or mutate the state. Call it signupcontroller.dot pile. Import Flutter Riverpod. Create signupController class which extends from state notifier of type signup_state. Also import signup_state.dot pile. Create default constructor and pass new signup_state object to superconstructor. Here we are initializing our state class with default values. Next, create onNameChange which takes a string. This function will be called every time the user types something in the name input field. Since name has changed, we are going to create a new name instance using dirty constructor. Use copy with method on state object to update the name only. Also need to update the status using prompts.validate. Now we updated the state instance, but this will not rebuild the widget. There will be no UI change. We have to assign this updated state instance to the state object, and now we mutated or updated the state. Similar to onNameChange, create onEmailChange and onPasswordChange. Finally, create signup with email and password. This method will be called when the button is pressed. First, check if the status is not validated, then return, which means we will not continue this method execution. For now, just print signup. With that, we have our controller ready. We have to create instance of this class, then call these methods. Now instead of creating a single instance of this class and pass around, we are going to create a global provider. Then using that ref object, we can access that provider from anywhere in our project. Keep that in mind, we are only creating global provider, not global state. Since signupController is state notifier, so we will use state notifier provider and store in a variable signup provider. Also add the generic types. This takes a function. It has a parameter ref. We can use this ref object to access any global provider from here. Initialize signupController here. Also make it auto dispose so the state destroys when we remove the widget. These two files could be one. We can use path directive to make signup state part of signupController. Next, we have our global provider and we have to make it accessible. We have to wrap the root of our app with provider scope, which is above material app. Provider scope stores the state of providers. Well, I made a mistake here. I should have added Flutter Riverpod, not Riverpod. Also fix the import inside signup file. Import Flutter Riverpod instead of Riverpod. Next, open name.dot file and import Flutter Riverpod. Change stateless widget to consumer widget. Consumer widget is exactly same as stateless widget, but we get widget ref parameter inside build method. We can access any provider using this ref object. So we are going to call the watch method on ref object and pass signup provider to listen to signup state. Watch will cause rebuilding the widget every time signup state mutates. So we don't have to worry about set state. Inside this on change callback, we get the user's entered name string. Use the read method and pass signup provider.notifier and call on name change and pass the name. We are using read method here without listening to it since we don't care about latest value or widget rebuild here. Next, we are going to show error text when the name is invalid. It looks like both name and name input field class has same name, so rename this class name to name field. Import form validators and call that show name error message static method on name and pass name.error, which is name validation error. Now if we switch to sign up, there is no error since name is pure now, even though empty name is not a valid name. As soon as we start typing, we can see the error, and when the name is valid, the error goes away. So create some variables here and store some objects. Before we proceed, we need to rename email, name and password for both sign up and sign in, and add field suffix to prevent name class. If you have downloaded the UI code, then you will not have this issue. Open email.dot file inside signup folder. The implementation will be almost same as the name field. Instead of name, we will use email. Test this and it's working. Next, do the password field similar to email and name. And it's time to work on the sign up button. As usual, the implementation will be almost the same. Get the sign up state and controller. Also get if the form status is validated. Here check if is validated, then call sign up with email and password, else null. If we reload the app and we can see the button has no on press animation. As soon as all fields are validated, we can press it. Check the debug console, we can see the sign up is printed. That completes our sign up validation. Next, time to validate sign in. Create a controller folder inside sign in folder. Create two files, sign in controller.dot and sign in state.dot. Make sign in state part of sign in controller. Then import Flutter Riverpod, form validators and equatable. Create sign in state class. Similar to sign up state class, everything will be same without the name property. Create sign in controller class. It will also be same as sign up controller, but instead of sign up state, we are going to have sign in state. Create on email change and on password change. Finally, sign in with email and password and return if form status is not validated and print sign in for now. At the top, create sign in provider. Open email field dot, import Flutter Riverpod, sign in controller and form validators. Change stateless widget to consumer widget and add ref parameter to build method. First, we need to get sign in state, so use the watch method on ref and pass sign in provider. Then get email status from signinState.email.invalid and store it in a variable called showError. Finally, get sign in controller. Use ref.read and pass sign in provider.notifier. Call showEmailErrorMessage static method on email if showError is true, else null. Inside the onChange callback, call onEmailChange and pass email, and our email field is done. Next, password field similar to email field, import the required files and change to consumer widget. We are going to check if password is invalid to show error text. Call on password change method on sign in controller. Next, sign in button. It will be similar to sign up button. Check if is validated true, then call sign in with email and password, else null. Finally, run the app and see it's working. And we are getting our print statement. Finally, we are going to work on Firebase Authentication. Open Firebase Auth repository, create a pubspec.yaml file, add necessary and required fields, add equatable Firebase Auth Google sign-in dependencies, add analysis_option.yaml file for links, add lib folder with the barrel file, and export these two files, and create those files inside src folder. Open auth_user.dart file. We get user from Firebase when the user successfully signed in. Since our main project won't have Firebase auth dependency, we will convert Firebase user to auth user. ID is required and every Firebase user has one. Both email and name could be null, and email verified by default will be false. When the user is not signed in, we get null. So we will instantiate auth user with empty ID and make it static. Therefore, we don't have to deal with null. Instead, we will return empty user. Also create a getter to check if the user is empty or not. Open Authentication repository. We are going to create our own specific exception for each type of failure. Sign up with email and password failure, sign in with email and password failure, and forgot password failure will have a require argument code. The Firebase auth exception has a code property which is human readable. We will pass that. Create authentication repository class. Initialize Firebase auth and Google sign-in. Create a getter method user which has return type stream of generic type auth user. And if you know anything about stream, then you know we can listen to a stream and get latest emitted value as they arrive. So we can listen to this stream and check if the auth user is empty, then we will show authentication view, else we will show home view. Therefore, our app authentication state will be reactive. Inside this method body, call the auth state changes method on Firebase auth, which returns stream of nullable user. So call map on it to convert stream of nullable user to stream of auth user. Inside the callback, we get access to the Firebase user, which is of type user. And we can check if Firebase user is null, which means the user is not signed in, and we will return an empty auth user object. Else we will create a new auth user object from Firebase user. Return auth user object from this callback. Also return this. Create an async method sign up with email and password, which takes email and password of type string. Call create user with email and password on Firebase auth and pass email and password. This method is async, so we need to await. This method can throw Firebase auth exception, so put that in try catch block. And inside the catch block, throw our own exception, sign up with email and password failure, which we created above. And pass the code. Next, create sign in with email and password, similar to sign up with email and password, but this time call sign in with email and password on Firebase auth, and throw sign in with email and password failure. Next, forgot password. This method takes only email, and call send password reset email method on Firebase auth and pass the email. Throw forgot password failure exception. Next, sign out. Call sign out on both Firebase auth and Google sign in. Next, sign in with Google. This is an async method, and return type is future uptype nullable boolean. And add a try catch and throw sign in with Google failure. Get Google sign-in account is nullable. Check if null, then throw sign in with Google failure. This happens when the user cancels that dialog. Then get Google sign-in auth, then credential. And finally, we can call sign in with credential on Firebase auth. We are going to store user credential and check if the user is new. Since a user can be existing or new, then we might want to write on Cloudflare Store or do something else. So that was sign in with Google, and also that completes our authentication repository package. Open pubspec.yaml file of our main project. Add authentication repository dependency. Create a file auth repo provider.dot inside repository folder. Import authentication repository and Flutter Riverpod, and create global authentication repository provider. Since we just can't instantiate authentication repository anywhere we need to use provider to provide a single instance, and we shouldn't create this provider inside our authentication repository package. To keep our code reusable and decoupled, for example, you could upload this authentication repository on GitHub and reuse it in other projects. Those projects might not use Riverpod. That's the whole point of creating a package in the first place. Time to create controller for authentication. Create controller folder inside authentication. Inside that, create two files, authentication controller.dot and authentication state.dot. Inside authentication controller.dot, import these files and make authentication state part of this file. Open authentication state.dot file. Create an enum called authentication status with two values, authenticated and unauthenticated. Create authentication state class which extends from equatable. Create two properties, status of type authentication status and user of type auth user. Create a private constructor where status is required and by default user is empty. Then create a named constructor authentication state.authenticated, which takes auth user. it will call the private constructor and set status to authenticated and pass the auth user to user. Create another named constructor authentication state.unauthenticated. This will set the status to unauthenticated and user already has a default value which is empty. Open authentication controller.dart file. Create a class auth controller extends from state notifier of generic type authentication state. Add a property authentication repository. Require this in the constructor. Call super and initialize authentication state using authentication state.unauthenticated constructor. Now we need to listen to the stream of auth user to check if the user is signed in and update the state. We have to start listening to the stream as soon as we initialize auth controller. We are going to do this inside the constructor's body. Call a private method on user change to extract the logic and pass the user. Create that method and inside that check if the user is empty, then set the state to authentication state.unauthenticated, else set authenticated and pass the user. Also create on signout method. When we listen to a stream, it returns stream subscription. We need to store it in a variable and cancel inside dispose method. At the top, create our global auth provider. And use the ref object to watch auth repo provider, which returns authentication repository. Open main.dart file. Import authentication controller.dart file. Convert stateless widget to consumer widget. Get the authentication state by watching auth provider. Import profile.dart file. Create a method getHomeUpReturnType widget and check if the status is equal to authenticated, then return profile. Else if unauthenticated, return authentication view. And also return authentication view from else. Finally, call this method to home property. Open signupcontroller.dart file, import auth repo provider and authentication repository files. Now we need authentication repository inside signup controller. Use ref.watch to get access authentication repository. Down here inside signup with email and password, first set the status to submission in progress, then add a try catch block. We are going to catch sign up with email and password failure and update this state. Set status to submission failure and pass the error code. Inside the try block, call sign up with email and password on authentication repository and pass email and password values, which is of type string. If this method doesn't throw an exception, then set the status to submission success. So we're done with sign up. Open sign-in controller similar to sign-up controller. Import these files and add authentication repository property. Inside the sign-in with email and password, write this logic which is same as sign up. Stop the app, and finally it's time we add Firebase to our project. Before we add Firebase, make sure you have to update the bundle ID if you are planning to publish this app. Open Firebase console and add a new project called Firebase Authentication, and name is up to you. And we don't need Google Analytics. Go to Authentication tab and enable email and Google sign-in provider. Next, you need to install Firebase CLI and add the path to environment for global access. Then you have to log in by typing Firebase login in the terminal. I'm not going to show that since it's not related to this project only. And it's very straightforward. Check the documentation linked in the description. Anyway, open terminal and run Flutter configure. Then select the project. Make sure to select the correct one. And type Y. And now we can see a new file is generated, Firebase option.dart inside lib folder. Also, Google service.json file added. If we open our Firebase console, we can see Android and iOS apps have been added. Open iOS app and download that Google service info.plist file. Right click the iOS folder and open in Xcode. Open Finder and drag and drop this downloaded info.plist file to the runner folder. Select reverse client ID and copy the value. Open the project configuration and make sure select our app in the target section. Then select the import tab and expand the URL type section. Click the plus button and paste the copied reverse client ID value in the URL schemes. Close the Xcode. Next, open Mac OS in Xcode. Make sure these are selected, then open Sign In and Capabilities tab and check the outgoing connections. We need to now provide SH1 certificate fingerprints to Android app. You can learn more about that from this documentation since we are making this app in debug mode, so copy this code and open terminal and paste it. The password is Android. Copy the SH1 code. Then open Android app on Firebase console. Then add the fingerprints and paste the code. And we're pretty much done configuring our project. Add Firebase code to pubspec.yaml file. Open main.pile, import that auto-generated Firebase options.pile and Firebase core. Inside the main method, we need to initialize Firebase. This is done by calling native code using platform channel asynchronously. So we have to call ensure initialize to make sure that we have an instance of the widgets binding. Now run the app. The error message telling that to add version 9 to iOS pod pile. So let's just do that. Next, install Cocoa Pods. Run this command in terminal sudo gem install Cocoa Pods. Then go to iOS directory by typing cd iOS and run pod install space --repo -update. And we are getting error. The reason we are getting error because we need to increase the version to 10 inside iOS pod pile. Now we should be fine. Now run the app and it's built successfully. Try to sign up and we are successfully signed up. We can also see the new user in the Firebase console. But we can't sign out since we haven't added anything to our profile view. So let's do that. Import these files and convert stateless widget to consumer widget. Then get the auth controller and call sign out method on it. And now we are being able to sign out. Since we are already in profile view, let's show auth user data from Firebase. First, listen to authentication state object, then access to the auth user and store it in a variable. Now use auth user and access their fields ID, email address, email verified, then pass to text widget to show on the UI. Now if we try to sign in using that email and password, we can do that as well. And we can also see our ID, email and email verified status. If you have noticed, we don't have any loading animation when we sign in or sign up. So let's just implement that. Open signup.pile inside signup folder. Import Flutter Riverpod, form validators, signup controller, and finally loading error.pile. Change to consumer widget. And we are going to use listen method, which is similar to what. But instead of rebuilding the widget, we can execute a function when the state changes. We also get access to current and previous state. And inside that function, we can check if status is submission in progress, then show loading animation. Else if is submission failure, then first we pop that loading sheet, then show error dialog and pass the error message. Similar to sign up, also implement for sign in. Import the required files. Make it consumer widget. Call listen and inside the listener callback, write exactly same logic as sign up. We can see both loading sheet and error dialog. Before we build on Android and macOS, we have to implement Google sign in and forgot password. Create a controller folder inside Google Sign-in folder. Call it Google Sign-in controller. Import authentication repository Flutter, Riverpod, and auth repo provider. Create an enum Google sign-in state with 4 values: initial, loading, success, and error. Create Google sign-in controller which require authentication repository. Set initial state to Google sign-in state.initial. Create an async function sign in with Google. Set the state to loading, then try to sign in with Google. If throws an error, then catch sign in with Google failure and update the state. Also update this state to success if successfully signed in. This method returns a nullable boolean for new user. So we can check if the user is new, and inside this block we can write to database or cloud pastor. Finally, at the top, create Google sign-in provider. Next, open Google Sign-in button the dot file. Import Flutter, Riverpod, Google Sign-in controller, and error dialog the dot files. As usual, convert to consumer widget. Call listen on ref. Show loading sheet when the state is loading, and show error dialog with message Google sign-in failed when the state is error. Right now the on tab callback is empty, so get access to the controller, then call sign in with Google. Lastly, we have to implement forget password. Open forgot password folder, create the controller folder, create forgot password controller.dot file, and import these files. Also add the path directory for forgot password state.dot file. Create forgot password state.dot file. Add path of directive and create forgot password state class extends from equatable. It will have 3 properties: email, status, and error message. Give email and status PO value. Add copy with method. Finally, override props. Open forgot password controller.dot file. Create forgot password controller which extends from state notifier of generic type forgot password state. Add authentication repository, then pass initial state to super. Similar to sign up and sign in controller, create on email change method. Then create an async function forgot password similar to what we did before. There is nothing new to explain. Finally, at the top, create the global provider forgot password provider. Open forgot password view.dot file and import these files. Then convert to consumer widget. Store forgot password state in a variable. Also store status in a variable. Call show email error message and pass validation error. Inside the on change callback, call on email change and pass the user's entered email. For cancel buttons callback, check If status is submission in progress, then return null, which will make this button disable. For request button callback, check if status is submission in progress or is submission success, then return null. And inside the callback, call forget password method on forget password controller. Up here, create a method getButtonText to return string based on prompt status. Inside the text widget, call that method and pass the status. And finally, call listen method on ref object, then show error dialog when the status is failure. Alright, enough typing, time to run the app. Let's test the Google sign in on iOS first. And you can see I am able to sign in. Let's test the forgot password. So I already tried to request the email, but I received email in spam folder. But anyway, if I open again and see the request button is in disabled mode and it is in is submission success state. This is not what we want. The state is persisting. We want the state to be destroyed when we close the route. So open forgot password controller.dot file, then add auto dispose on state notifier provider. And now if we close the route, the state will be destroyed. And here you can see I received an email to change password. Next, open Android emulator and run the app and try to create account and try to sign in. Also try sign in with Google and you can see everything is working fine. Run on macOS and I'm getting error. It's telling me to change the version from 10.11 to 10.12 in macOS pod file. So let's fix that quickly. Now run again and we are successfully being able to sign up and sign in on macOS. At the time I'm recording this video, Google Sign-In doesn't support macOS. Lastly, one thing I want to recommend you to upload these two packages on GitHub private repo. So in the future, if you work on any project that has prompt validation or Firebase Authentication, you can depend on that from GitHub and start working without spending time writing boring codes. Alright, so that was the tutorial, a very long tutorial by the way. If you made this part and learned something new, or if this video was helpful, then give this video a thumbs up and also leave a comment. This will help YouTube algorithm to pick my channel. And of course, definitely subscribe to my channel so you don't miss my future videos. And I will see you in my next video. Assalamu alaikum.